Hello, you're watching TVP World News. I'm Jonasz Rewiski. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy will attend next week's NATO Summit in The Hague, the European Council confirmed on Friday. According to the Kiev Post, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen will meet Zelenskyy on the 24th of June. It comes after the Ukrainian leader was reportedly reconsidering attending the alliance's annual leaders' meeting. Last weekend specifically, a meeting was scheduled between Zelenskyy and Donald Trump at the G7 summit in Canada, but the US president pulled out of the summit early, with speculations that his decision to leave ahead of schedule might have been linked to escalating tensions in the Middle East. Nearly 50% more civilians have been killed and injured in Ukraine in the first 5 months of 2025 than during the same period in 2024. The United Nations Assistant Secretary General Miroslav Vienza briefed the UN Security Council on the situation in Ukraine, describing the rise in Russian strikes as alarming and condemning all attacks at civilian infrastructure.
According to Ukrainian authorities, between 1 and 17 June 2025, Russian armed forces launched at least 3,340 long-range drones, including loitering munitions and decoy drones, and 135 missiles into Ukraine. By comparison, 544 long-range munitions were launched during the entire month of June 2024. Let me once again unequivocally state: attacks against civilians and civilian infrastructure are strictly prohibited under international humanitarian law wherever they occur. We condemn all such attacks. They must cease immediately.
Nearly 50% more civilians have been killed and injured in Ukraine in the first 5 months of 2025 than during the same period in 2024. The UN Mine Action Service estimates that over 20% of Ukraine's land is contaminated by mines or unexploded ordnance, making it the most heavily contaminated country since World War II.
This is not a war fought in trenches. This Russian war is waged in bedrooms. This Russian war is a war in kitchens, war in playgrounds, war in hospitals, in schools. This is pure terror that never sleeps, terror that steals tomorrow before the dawn can break. This madness has to stop.
Now, Russia's leader Vladimir Putin has reiterated a common false propaganda narrative on Ukraine, alleging that Ukrainians and Russians are one people, and concluding that all of Ukraine should therefore belong to Russia. Putin made these remarks when asked about the Russian army advances during his appearance at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. Putin's remarks met with fierce international criticism, with Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha calling them a display of disdain for the peace process. The Russian leader also warned that Moscow's forces might take the town of Sumy in an effort to create a buffer zone around the Russia-Ukraine border. Russia currently controls a fifth of Ukraine's territory, including Crimea, nearly all of the Luhansk region, over 70% of the Donetsk, Zaporizhia and Kherson regions, as well as fragments of the Kharkiv, Sumy and Dnipropetrovsk regions of Ukraine. Putin's claims form part of Moscow's false narrative on Ukraine, attempting to deny Ukrainians their separate identity and culture in order to justify Moscow's invasion. There are cracks within the current economic system of the Russian Federation. The guys who manage the economy are aware of that, said Filip Rudnik, research fellow at the Center for Eastern Studies, in an interview with TVP World. The analyst commented on Russian leader Vladimir Putin and his speech at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum.
Despite the fact that all the spotlight of this economic forum was, as always, concentrated on Vladimir Putin and his presence, this particular clip from this macroeconomic session, joined by the head of the central bank, the Ministry of Economy and the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Economic Development, it all shows that there are some cracks within the current, I would say, economic system of Russian Federation. That despite all these chants and all the slogans that are being shared, for instance, by Vladimir Putin himself, the guys who are, playing a central role in rolling, are all more like leading this machine. They are pretty well aware that the current trajectory of the economic development of Russia has already been brought down and slowing down.
Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney will reportedly sign a defence partnership deal with the European Union on Monday. Canadian media report that Carney will ink the agreement while in Brussels for an EU-Canada summit ahead of next week's NATO gathering in The Hague. Monday's Canada-EU meeting aims to strengthen contacts in trade, security and defence issues. Canadian media report that the partnership agreement is expected to be among one of the most far-reaching deals the European Union has ever signed with a third country. Poland's embassy in Rome has intervened after one of Italy's newspapers has published a false claim related to Ukraine. Now, the move came after Italy's Libero newspaper incorrectly asserted that Warsaw has always laid claim to parts of western Ukraine, especially the Lviv region, thereby repeating an unfounded narrative often advanced by Moscow. The head of the mission at the Polish embassy, Ryszard Schnepf, told the Daily's editor-in-chief that the article in question caused astonishment and bitterness. According to the RMF24 news site, he said Poland clearly supports sovereign Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders, meaning those from before Russia's invasion of Crimea back in 2014. Schnepf said the statement in the article does not correspond to the truth, adding that talking about Polish claims to parts of Ukraine is in fact political fiction. The US Special Envoy for Ukraine, Keith Kellogg, is reportedly planning to visit Belarus in the coming days to revive peace negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. Could the visit also be linked to the upcoming joint military drills of Russian and Belarusian forces? Let's take a look.
Belarus, a de facto puppet state of Russia, run by one of Russian President Vladimir Putin's closest allies, Alexander Lukashenko. That's where US Special Envoy Keith Kellogg is rumored to go in the coming days. The purpose of the visit, still unclear.
US side should make some room for negotiations with Belarusian regime to take him, if not completely out of the hands of Russia, but at least to make some distance.
He's hoping to kickstart some kind of peace talks to end Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine.
According to the Vyazna Human Rights Center, there are more than 1,000 political prisoners behind bars in Belarus. While the future looks bleak,
there is indeed a cautious hope that this potential visit and in general negotiations, conversations between the US and the regime in Belarus could lead to release of more political prisoners.
This is how the authoritarian government dealt with democratic protests after the rigged elections of 2020. Democratic dissent is repressed so harshly that barely any information leaves the country to the outside world. Opposition leaders are trying to do what they can from abroad, but even outside their homeland, they're not completely safe.
During these 4 years, my team has counted more than 100 threats directed at me. These are threats of murder and kidnapping.
Earlier this year, the Belarusian opposition leader in exile, Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya, told TVP World that they were engaged in talks with US President Donald Trump.
And now we have to explain how Belarus is strategically important for peace and security in the region, not a separate country.
Nestled between Poland, Lithuania, Latvia and Ukraine, Belarus is one of the biggest Russian footholds in the region. In 2022, one of the major Russian offensives in the beginning of the war came from Belarus and threatened the capital city, Kyiv. And in autumn of this year, Belarus will be holding the Zapad 2025 military exercises with Russia, aimed at simulating a potential invasion of a NATO country.
Belarus. Russia is preparing something there this summer, using military drills as cover. And that's usually how they start a new attack. But where will it go? I don't know. Ukraine, Lithuania, Poland, God bless, no. But we all need to be ready.
Keith Kellogg's visit to Minsk and a meeting with Lukashenko has been mentioned as a possibility by an unnamed source in the Trump administration. If it takes place, it would be the first meeting of a senior US official with the Belarusian self-proclaimed leader in years. For TVP World, I'm Kazimierz Łysiak.
Estonian defense forces are digging anti-tank trenches on its eastern border shared with Russia. The move is part of a region-wide push for bolstering borders shared with Russia and Belarus, which have been described as the greatest and most immediate threat to both NATO and the European Union.
In this case, the anti-tank ditch we're talking about will halt the enemy. It will slow down their actions, while if they attempt to create a passage through it, they will become very good targets for our weapons. The ditch is around 4 meters wide and 3 meters deep. The soil from the ditch is usually placed on our side to provide additional obstruction. Currently, up to 4 kilometers of anti-tank ditches are under construction. The locations of up to 28 bunkers are being confirmed, and we plan to finalize them by this fall, along with up to 10 storage areas. The current section being built is located on land owned by the Ministry of Interior. For other segments, the design process is still ongoing, and once completed, we will know how many private landowners or municipalities we need to involve. There are 3 options for reaching an agreement. Either we buy the necessary section from the private owner, lease it, or offer a land exchange.
The Netherlands has launched its largest ever security operation dubbed Orange Shield, involving tens of thousands of soldiers, police and the Dutch Navy. It comes as around 6,000 delegates, including US President Donald Trump, French President Emmanuel Macron and Britain's Prime Minister Keir Starmer will gather in The Hague for the high-stakes NATO Summit.
The danger is that we can be surprised by a threat which is coming to the NATO Summit, and we want to prevent that. So the aim is to observe everything what's happening in the area, at sea and in the air, and therefore we are operating here. And in the case of an escalation, we can conduct operations to ensure the safety of the NATO Summit. We have scenarios which always can happen, like we have seen at 9/11. That's the ultimate scenario which you can have probably in the air with a hijacked aircraft. And these are also scenarios which we take into mind. We don't hope it to happen, but in case it happens, we have everything in place to handle this kind of situations carefully.
Authorities in Northern Europe have issued health alerts ahead of a weekend heat wave that's expected to bake much of the region. In the United Kingdom, forecasters say temperatures could hit 34 degrees Celsius on Saturday, following a week of unusually warm weather. The UK Met, or Meteorological Office, issued an amber alert covering all of England through to Monday morning because of increased health risks. In France, it's expected to be even hotter, with temperatures possibly reaching 38 degrees Celsius in the south and west of the country. While in Spain, where the mercury soared to 40 degrees Celsius on Friday, the outlook for the weekend is similarly scorching. Forecasters in Germany predict temperatures topping 33 degrees Celsius in some parts of the country. Officials are also warning of an increased risk of wildfires in several areas. And that's all for now. Thank you for watching, and please stay with us here on TVP World.